Good morning. Can you hear me now? Yes. Sorry. Uh, Helps to turn on the microphone, I suppose. And I was just saying that after Christmas, everyone is exhausted. My wife, Debbie, is just conked out, and I did get up and wake myself up by taking a shower. So I did that by turning on the nightlight in our shower room so that I wouldn't, because in that room, if you turn on the light, you also get this roaring fan, which is very not fun. Good morning, Art. I hope Christmas was uh, happy for you. Nice to see you. And uh, anyway, let me think here. I'm going to do a couple of things. I'm hoping Jordan Hoggard will join me for discussion, but uh, I know that all of us are exhausted after all the preparation for Christmas. Whenever it comes around Thanksgiving time, uh, I love Thanksgiving as a holiday because it's our one family holiday that all Americans can celebrate. But uh, right after Thanksgiving comes Christmas and preparation, and it's always a big deal to prepare for it, make sure we have it, um, and make sure everyone feels recognized and honored by being present. And anyway, this year, to some people who I couldn't get them to everyone, but I got um, this book, um, Call Us What We Carry by Amanda Gorman. Um, Come on. Yeah, that's not working, so I'll have to turn off uh, the cloaking device for a moment so that you can see the cover. Um, okay, so this is the book by Amanda Gorman, Call Us What We Carry. And so into a few of these, I put a a question, sort of a quiz on what is it that Amanda wants us to be called. And if you've been paying attention, all of you should have received the poem that gives you that answer. And so somebody is going to put it up on the screen here before too long. And so the question is, what does Amanda Gorman want us to be called? And this a brilliant young woman who was selected to read her poem for the inauguration, and was selected as the National Youth Poet Laureate. And I think most of you know her. I've come to really love her work because she really expresses a lot of things about the human condition and about being an American. There's some wonderful music videos on YouTube with Amanda Gorman, and one uh, one is called, I think, "Hymn for the Republic," which has her reading her poem with the Boston Pops behind her. So here's this 22-year-old woman, graduate of Harvard College, who was selected by the Boston Pops to be highlighted at the 4th of July celebration a couple of years back. And that video is found on YouTube. So I urge you to go follow her work on YouTube. Just adjusting my screen so that I can see your comments. And so I thought what I would do this morning, I was hoping Jordan would be here, but I thought I would read through some of her poems, and I will come to call us to what we carry. Later, all of you would have received a copy of the poem yesterday from me, because I sent it out to everybody on my list as a Christmas gift. But before I get to that one, I'm just going to delay a little bit in order to give Jordan some more time, because where he is at 7 in the morning, and it's always it always makes me happy when he makes it to join me, because it's 2 hours earlier for him. For me, it's 9 in the morning, and so I aim this. And hello, Kushbu, thank you for your thought. I appreciate it very much. Kushbu is a friend of mine that she and I read the Bhagavad Gita together, and she and I have been corresponding now for a couple of years. And so we have a strong connection with one another, especially after reading that sacred text over a 5-month period, I think, last year in 2020. It's quite a challenge. It's quite emotional to read a sacred text end to end, and Kushbu read it in Sanskrit, and I read it in 3 versions in English. It's very impressive, is what I could say about it. But anyway, I sent some of my friends this book, Call Us What We Carry, by Amanda Gorman. And I'm going to read some of the poems which you would not have seen, and just talk through them, because the idea of Jungian psychology is to connect us up with our unconscious. That's called the transcendent function in Jungian thought. And when we're connected with our unconscious, it heals us in certain ways that are mystical, actually. And if we can get a solid connection there, it's quite impressive. And if you are troubled in your life, if you have that connection through art of any kind, you can find a way forward in your life. And so the first one I'm going to read, and this book is rather uncloak again. This book is rather much about COVID, because Amanda, among other things, was not able to graduate from Harvard College. And hello, James, nice to see you. And anyway, so here she is on the back of the book. And this was an instant bestseller. I know because of the number of copies that I purchased and mailed to people. And and I really love this book. I'm gonna give you a little bit different view. This is where I live, actually, in these buildings, although I don't live on the water side, I live on the land side. But what you can see behind me over my over this shoulder is the Chesapeake Bay Bridge that crosses, is a 5-mile long bridge that crosses the Chesapeake Bay, and it's at its highest point, it's 188 feet over the Chesapeake Bay, so that shipping could go up to Baltimore. But I'm going to talk about the shallows, and actually the Chesapeake Bay is the shallows, with the exception of a shipping canal where that is deep enough for ships. It's about 100 feet deep. The rest of the bay average is 15 feet deep. And so one way you can tell if somebody is a sailor is if you ask them this question: have you ever run aground in the Chesapeake Bay? And if they tell you they never ran aground, you know that they are not a sailor, or they're not experienced in the Chesapeake Bay. Jordan, I've been wasting time, but I'm about to read a poem. And
nice. Good morning.
And I've wound up for this, and then you and I will talk.
The shallows.
Yeah, I'm going to start with the shallows. And
nice.
So this is partially about COVID, and it relates to all our experiences. And the idea of reading it and you listening to it is that it will open your psyche to your unconscious, because you won't have been thinking about these things before I read them. And then we'll move on. So the shallows. Touch deficient and light starved we were, like an inverted flame, eating any warmth down to its studs. The deepest despair is ravenous. It takes and takes and takes. A stomach never satisfied. It is not hyperbole. All that is gorgeous and good and decent is no luxury, not when its void brings us to the wide wharf of war. Even as we stand stone still even if we stand stone still, it's with the entirety of what we've lost sweeping through us like a ghost. What we have lived remains indecipherable, and yet we remain, and still we write, and so we write. Watch us move above the fog like a promontory at dusk. Shall this leave us bitter or better? Grieve, then choose. Okay. Jordan, do you want to comment on this poem?
This is such a wonderful poem that feels like she's a sister from another mother, frankly.
Yeah, sure.
Because, I mean, I'm always talking about be actionable. And instead of just imagination, and that's a really cool idea, have imagine action. Let the formless inspire you. And when she says, shall this leave us bitter or better? That's a piece. Then grieve. That's a piece, double spaced even. I mean, phrasing wise in poetry. And then choose. So there's an action. There is a live. There is the understand your sorrow, understand your joy. But what I find all the way throughout here is really it's written in the spirit of the harmonies that joy sings. And especially when she says, the deepest despair is ravenous. Yeah. That line is touching, because to me, especially with my clients, it's teaching people how to make shame walk the plank, because anxiety and despair are usually tied to its ankles, and that deepest despair, is tied to one of those ankles, but that means it lives in a deeper blind spot, and it's ravenous, and it will suck you dry, literally.
Boy.
It will take entirely take you into a state of desiccation. You know, you have nothing inside, and that kind of internal vampirism is rampant in our modern society.
Absolutely.
People not doing something because they don't know what to do, simply because they never rite of passage became their own parent. They never birthed their parent. And this poem, to me, stands as, and what I love about Amanda Gorman, age is just a number. That's a cliche. Except with her, age is just a number. She is a strong poet. She is a strong voice, and it does not matter that she hasn't even passed 25. She is a person. She is a woman. She is not just brilliant. She is poetically brilliant. And what to me that is that's the EQ, the emotional intelligence quotient of the intelligence. She's able to then choose.
Yeah, and she's able to express what many of us cannot express or haven't expressed,
right?
And to bring it to our attention so that we can pay attention to it. So I want to read this poem again because the first time you hear a poem, it's it's kind of in a way shocking. And so what I'd like to do is I'd like to read it again and then ask Jordan to read it so that each of you can have an opportunity to hear it twice more before we move on.
And I love that, especially because I remember my dad at his own poetry readings. As you know, he was Poet Laureate of Texas in 2000. And he just never didn't make me laugh when someone would say, "Mr. Hoggard, what does that poem mean?" "Okay, if you insist, I'll read it again." Right. That's all he would do. He would let it speak for itself. So I appreciate, you read it again and then I'll read it. And
then we'll move on to others. But so this is called The Shallows. Deep or touch deficient. I'll start again, sorry. The shallows, touch deficient and light starved we were, like an inverted flame eating any warmth down to its studs. The deepest despair is ravenous. It takes and takes and takes. A stomach never satisfied. This is not hyperbole. All that is gorgeous and good and decent is no luxury, not when its void brings us to the wide wharf of war. Even as we stand stone still, it's with the entirety of what we've lost sweeping through us like a ghost. What we have lived remains indecipherable, and yet we remain, and still we write, and so we write. Watch us move above the fog, like a promontory at dusk. Shall this leave us bitter or better? Grieve, then choose.
Okay. And I'll read as well. And I would like to call attention to the fourth line before I start. Eating any warmth down to its studs. The studs being the framing and architecture. And that's saying that the warmth is something we have built. So that's hidden in that line. And I find it very important. So I will read then by Amanda Gorman, The Shallows. Touch deficient and light starved we were, like an inverted flame, eating any warmth down to its studs. The deepest despair is ravenous. It takes and takes and takes, a stomach never satisfied. This is not hyperbole. All that is gorgeous and good and decent is no luxury, not when its void brings us to the wide wharf of war. Even as we stand stone still, it's with the entirety of what we've lost, sweeping through us like a ghost. What we have lived remains indecipherable, and yet we remain. And still, we write, and so we write. Watch us move above the fog like a promontory at dusk. Shall this leave us bitter or better? Grieve, then choose.
Yeah. And so, that's really the decision we have to make throughout our lives when something unfortunate happens to us, and we're faced with that decision, bitter or better. And it comes up certainly anytime you lose a loved one, and you have to go to their funeral. If you're, let's say, a 12-year-old child and your parent just died, how do you react to that? It's very difficult, obviously. And so, the whole idea of what we're doing here, I mean, the essence of Jungian psychology, through all the 20 volumes of the collected works and all of his other writing, much of which is still not published, is to open us up to the unconscious, so that our unconscious can do its job of healing us. Which is what we need. Good morning, Patrick. Good morning, James. Nice to see you. Okay.
And I'll speak to that grief also.
Yeah.
Specifically because I live kind of by the mantra of comfortable with the not knowing while daily getting things done. But that didn't just appear one day as a life mantra, as a quotable thing. It started, it was seeded in the garden when I was 23. My grandfather died, and he was a Methodist minister for over 60 years. He would have thought it absurd if there was an open casket in the church, so that would only be at the private viewing at the funeral home. And at that point, standing in front of the open casket, my stepmother walked up and she said, "Your eyes are going crazy. You look perplexed. You look confused." And I said, "Yeah, he taught me how do you hold your mouth and you turn your head, and that changes your perspective." I said, "But he's not here. That's not him."
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm betraying him because I'm not crying. And she just put her hand on my shoulder and she said, "Jordan, everybody grieves, and everybody grieves differently. But the thing to learn is that everybody grieves differently every time." So when Amanda Gorman says grieve, and that whole stanza, that one word is given a whole stanza. That's that. There's a whole process in the sequence of that one word, and we all grieve differently, and we all grieve differently each time. So at that point, allow that, going through whatever, and then once that's happened, choose. I mean, quick fixes have shallow roots, so you don't do what is expedient. You grieve. And then, you do what is right, because value is really king and queen there.
Right. Okay. So I want to move on to another poem here. And this is about what we mean to one another. And it's for Jordan, it's on page 200.
Closure right before what we carry, right? Okay.
Yeah. what the Buddhists teach is there's nothing but now. And I got a tremendous teaching on that from a couple of Hindu, I guess they were cleaning men at the Oberoi Hotel in Bangalore one time, because at that hotel there's a beautiful mahogany tree, and it shades the entire garden of the hotel. And these two cleaning men were standing in the garden, kind of in awe of this tree, which is massive. I mean, it's a huge tree. And those that can hear this right now, it's only Kushbu that could actually go and see it if she hasn't seen it already. But you just walk in through the lobby and into the garden, and there it is. And so on this one particular day, many times I've stayed there, and I have enjoyed in the morning walking around this garden and just being in awe of this mahogany tree. And so one day I ran into these two young fellows, and I said, what does this mean to you? And they one of them said, "You mean now?" And
how much of my story do you want? Is what right. It was just that one word,
right? And and it just shows the human condition, and I want to be sharing the human condition here today, as you know, part of our holiday observances. And so here there's one word in this poem, closure, that really means what we mean to one another, both Jordan and I, but also everyone that's watching right now. And so this poem is called Closure, and it's from Amanda Gorman's book, Call Us What We Carry. Closure. To begin again isn't to go backwards, but to decide to go. Our story is not a circle carved, but a spiral shed, shaped, spinning, shifting inward and outward ad infinitum, like a lung on the bank of speech. Breathe with us, we disembark both beside and beyond. Who we were, who we are, it is a return and a departure. We spiral on, pushing up and out, like a growing thing making its form out of earth. In a poem, there's no end, just a place where the page glows wide and waiting, like a lifted hand poised and paused. Here is our bond, unbordered by bone. Perhaps love is how it feels to breathe the same air. All we have is time, is now. Time takes us on. How we are moved says everything about what we are to each other, and what are we to each other, if not everything. Okay. And so obviously the key word in this poem is everything.
Yes, and I'd like to read it as well. And
go ahead. Yep. That's the plan here.
Yeah, and before I do, I just want to say that in regards to grief and the previous, the snake, its skin shedded. The snake, its skin not missed. There's her spiral. Yep. So I will read Closure by Amanda Gorman. To begin again isn't to go backwards, but to decide to go. Our story is not a circle carved, but a spiral shaped, spinning, shifting inward and outward ad infinitum, like a lung on the bank of speech. Breathe with us. We disembark both beside and beyond. Who we were, who we are, it is a return and a departure. We spiral on, pushing up and out, like a growing thing, making its form out of earth. In a poem, there's no end, just a place where the page glows wide and waiting, like a lifted hand, poised and paused. Here is our bond, unbordered by bone. Perhaps love is how it feels to breathe the same air. All we have is time, is now. Time takes us on. How are we moved says everything about what we are to each other and what are we to each other, if not everything. I have to say, unbordered by bone. I mean, she's cutting through internal boundaries there to place the space between outside, say, for example, between you and me here and us and the YouTube audience. There's that vessel she's speaking of in between, the place between. And her words craft so, I mean, she even, in a poem, there's no end. She even turns back to self-reflect the poem on the poet. So the narrator is outed. There's no fiction here. I mean, she's really dialed into how to express the life and death of both and, which is primary to Jungian psychology.
I'm just reading another one, which I find rather, I want to read, but I haven't yet found it in the book. I'm looking for it because I didn't know the page, unfortunately. But it's a very unique poem because it's written on its side. And
oh, nice. I love too that, I mean, for example, the last of the insert quotes it's a chapter called Resolution.
Yeah.
And it's John 1:1. In the beginning was the word, period. I mean, it just, she stands up a phrase out so well, even there.
Yeah. My goodness. There's so much in here that I'm sorry I didn't note this because it was.
You remember what it's called?
Yeah, Essex. And it looks like a fish on its side. I thought it was right near the beginning. Oh, here it is. Yeah, I've got it now. Right, it's right before. Okay, this poem is going to be about pretty shocking, probably, and I'll show you how it appears in this book. I'll close out, take off my cloaking. So here's the book, and it's across 2 pages. Looks like a fish, but it's actually words, and it's about our humanity, I think, and it's a bit shocking. So if you don't want to be awakened at this time in the morning or the day, maybe you don't want to listen to it, but I will read the intro to it. And then I will read the poem itself. It's called Essex 1. The Essex was an American whaling ship that was attacked by a sperm whale in 1820. Of the 20 crewmen, only 8 survived. Only 8 were rescued from being stranded at sea for 3 months. The tragedy inspired Herman Melville's Moby Dick. At the time, whales were killed for blubber, which was utilized in oil lamps as well as other commodities. I'm not telling you a story so much as a shipwreck. The pieces floating, finely legible, ocean vuong, on Earth were briefly gorgeous. Now that's only the intro to this. Put the sea behind me. So now I'm going to read the poem, which is in the shape of a fish, or in this case, I guess, the shape of a whale. Take tragedy. And this is in part about Jordan's dictum about don't waste trouble. And it's about our humanity as well. Take tragedy, write a book. Look, only when we're drowning do we understand how fierce our feet can kick. We were marred and moaning. Thick sea, how much more wreck do we have within us? Wherever we look, there's a body destroyed. We were told never to use I when writing, because eliminating this voice makes arguments legitimate. But we realize there is nothing that convinces like the self does. Our life, our body, its beating, proving its own jagged point. Tell us what is more powerful than the unerased. Those men spent months lost on waves, seeing no faces but their own, bleached by a sea of burns. Wait long enough and boys can become barbed as beasts, beards dripping down their chests like scarves. Does what survives, what is salvaged, need to be so savage? Is this the sea we rise from, not more animal, but more human? Haggard, hobbled, heart-strung, yes, but human and human. In other words, we become what we hunt as we inevitably begin to think like our prey. The slain fueled the lamps of a world latched to nights. Our whole century brightened by blood. When the whales slaughtered their ship, there was no doubt that hatred could live hosted in a creature. Whaling is like going to war. We may not return from the illegible wreckage, drifting by now on shaking small boats. The stranded crewmen turned away from the promise of land, dreading cannibals those red fables of the foreign. That one decision stretched out their horror the length of a raging ocean. Were we any different, any less rent, wrapped, and lost? Loss is undecipherable. Can we even be rescued if you've been ruined? We can see them now, after the fever of months, at the tail end of their blue nightmares. The flesh of friends flush against their teeth. They had eaten 7 of their own men. We become what we flee and what we fear. Who can pay the price of light? We may be wrong. We are wrong often, but we refuse to believe that the only way we learn is by whip and woe, the dart of disaster. Contrary to popular belief, it's not easy for us to lie. Even the body has tells. Even our blood runs toward truth. We are born right, trusting, unlimited, with all that we love, never banished. Look, our palms open but unemptied, just like a blooming thing. We're walking forward, also harboring just this one life. Okay. Love to hear your comment on this, Jordan.
Yeah, well, in the big picture, there's one thing about having superficial shapes in a poem that's cliche, but here you really feel the vessel of the whale, and that she poured the words into that form. Yeah. And especially because here's a trick that I actually have never seen: the line break in mid-word, in one syllable words. She's not making a break at a syllabic point. She's simply making a break because the word came up against the boundary of the container, the vessel of the whale. So in this, I mean, honestly telling, the blood runs towards the truth, honestly telling the story. I mean, the cannibalism, they didn't want to land because of the red foreigners,
the cannibals on shore,
except then hypocritically, what do? Well, that's what they do. Well, they didn't want to see themselves. She's telling the truth of that there. And that she even goes so far as to, the school, that standard teaching, don't use the first person, don't use I, write in the third person, write like a review, write in the second person, but God forbid you actually speak your voice. And she says, because if you use I, that makes it legitimate. Well, and God forbid we make anything legitimate. So that the whole thing, I mean, the form, breaking words mid-word in one syllable words, this and I love too the battering ram of the head. The whale is not in situ in the ocean. The whale is hitting the ship. It has a crunched nose, flat. I mean, so you don't see the ship there, but if you look up at that first line, take tragedy, write a book. Well, boom, that's where the whale is hitting the side of the ship. Yes.
Let me sorry to do this so often, but
and I didn't notice that till just now, just looking at.
You're quite right. The whale's nose is a battering ram.
Yeah, and I just noticed that she's telling the story of the ship that is no longer there just by the shape of the first line.
Yep, incredible.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, your reading, sir, and right. So folks, bear with us. One more reading of this. It puts us in touch with our humanity.
Mm-hmm. So SX1, the frontispiece, I would say, to this poem, it's a volume in itself. SX1, the Essex was an American whaling ship that was attacked by a sperm whale in 1820. Of the 20 crewmen, only 8 survived. Only 8 were rescued after being stranded at sea for 3 months. The tragedy inspired Herman Melville's Moby Dick. At the time, whales were killed for blubber, which was utilized in oil lamps as well as other commodities. I'm not telling you a story so much as a shipwreck, the pieces floating, finally legible. Ocean Vuong from On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous. And Amanda Gorman's poem for SX1. Take a tragedy, write a book. Look, only when we're drowning do we understand how fierce our feet can kick. We were marred and moaning thick sea. How much more wreck do we have within us? Wherever we look, there's a body destroyed. We were told never to use I when writing, because eliminating this voice makes arguments legitimate. But we realize there is nothing that convinces like the self does. Our life, our body, and its beating, proving its own jagged point. Tell us what is more powerful than the unerased. Those men spent months lost on waves, seeing no faces but their own, bleached by a sea of burns. Wait long enough, and boys can become barbed as beasts. Beards dripping down their chests like scarves. Does what survives, what is salvaged, need to be so savage? Is this the sea we rise from? Not more animal, but more human? Haggard, hobbled, heartstrung. Yes, but human and human. In other words, we become what we hunt as we inevitably begin to think like our prey. The slain fuel the lamps of a world latched to nights, our whole century brightened by blood. When that whale slaughtered their ship, there was no doubt that hatred could live hosted in a creature. Whaling is like going to war. We may not return from the illegible wreckage. Drifting by now on shaking small boats, the stranded crewmen turned away from the promise of land, dreading cannibals, those red fables of the foreign. That one decision stretched out their horror the length of a raging ocean. Were we any different, any less rent, wrapped, and lost? Lost is undecipherable. Can you even be rescued if you've been ruined? We can see them now, after the fever of months, at the tail end of their blue nightmares, the flash of friends flushed against their teeth. They had eaten 7 of their own men. We become what we flee and what we fear. Who can pay the price of light? We may be wrong. We are wrong often. But we refuse to believe that the only way we learn is by whip and woe, the dart of disaster. Contrary to popular belief, it's not easy for us to lie. Even the body has tells. Even our blood runs towards truth. We are born right, trusting, limited, with all that we love never banished. Look, our palms open but unemptied, just like a blooming thing. We're walking forward, also harboring just this one life.
Yeah, and I need to correct one misreading there. It's unlimited, not limited. So we are born right, trusting, unlimited, with all that we love never banished. Look, our palms open but unemptied, just like a blooming thing. We're walking forward, also harboring just this one life.
Oh, nice. Did I say limited right there?
Yep, you said limited.
Oh,
So.
Thanks for the correction. No, that's that. Wow, that's a flip right there.
Yeah.
That's interesting because Freudian slip, Jungian slip. I mean, that's me putting me on the boat, and don't go to the red foreigners. What came to me while I was reading this is, as she made the unity of predator and prey, the unity of that which basically goes out and hunts its own food. It reminded me of Friedrich Nietzsche, when he said, be careful when fighting monsters not to become one. And I think that voice of be careful when fighting monsters not to become one voice is here in her as the narrator. But instead of saying be careful, she's simply telling the truth. She's writing the scene, so to speak. And I laugh at the word haggard. My last name's Hoggard. People often mispronounce it Haggard. And I'm like, no, Haggard maybe how I feel sometimes, but Hoggard's the name. But when she puts that Haggard, more animal, but more human.
Yeah.
You know, there's that spiral she's talking about in previous there, where it's not that animals have consciousness or don't, or that if we're animal, we're base. No, we become more animal, and becoming more animal makes us more human.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a deeper, I think, meaning and a deeper embodiment, I think,
Yeah.
of life, and in a both and way in her work.
Right.
Just even in the form. I mean, I didn't notice the battering ram piece until, you were just about to finish reading, and I just looked up to experience hearing you read, and I looked at the front, and I'm like, whoa, the ship that's not there anymore. Boom.
Right.
And you just she's telling a whole story that doesn't even get told, so
Right.
that's to be pretty beautiful.
Yeah. So this is a book of humanity. We're going to read two more poems, and we're reading from Amanda Gorman's poems, Call Us What We Carry. And so now we're going to read the two poems that sum up what the title is all about. And I'm on page 34. Jordan.
Mm-hmm. And I have to say, the title, Call Us What We Carry, I mean, it's obviously reminiscent of Jung's "You are not what you say you're going to do, you are what you do." So right. Call us what we carry. I mean, there's so much in just the title,
right?
Because there's an honesty instead of self-foolery,
right?
Which is the worst tomfoolery that's right there in just even the title.
Right. And by the way, just in case you're interested, the poem that she wrote for the inauguration, called The Hill We Climb, does appear in this book. And this book is an instant bestseller on the New York Times list. And it only was released about 10 days ago. Or I forget when it was released in time for it to be the obvious book that I would send to my friends this year. And so I've bought, I think I bought about 25 copies actually.
And then you sparked me to then order 10. I mean,
really?
So yeah, so when they arrive, it's going to be fun to inscribe and write the cards and push them back out again. And who knows how many people those people will. I mean,
yeah.
This to me, it transcends bestseller. This is to me one of those pivotal works where, wise in time, we can feel the milestone in the moment instead of waiting for history to tell us this is life happening here.
Right. And so the reason, as I've said a number of times in this session, the essence of Dr. Jung's work was to open up a pathway to the unconscious, what he called the transcendent function, so that we can so that we can receive the healing which is existent in our unconscious. And in order to do that, sometimes we have to open up our own humanity. So as much as the last poem that we read was quite shocking, it was also quite memorable.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I don't think anybody who reads it or hears it will forget it. And it really introduces us to our humanity. What will we do at sea if something like that happens? And
I also like to make the point too that when she tells it the way she tells it, it's not G or PG or R, X, triple X. It needs no rating. It's simply a snapshot alive of the human condition. And to me, that needs no rating. It needs just simply to be seen. by all without
Yeah.
qualification. I mean, her
Yeah.
words literally live and die. I mean, and I love that no one cares about the blood, sweat, and tears in a poem. It could have taken 5 minutes or 50 years or 5 lifetimes, who knows? But the craft of the phrasing, and simply not just the word choice, but the word placement. I mean, there's an architecture here just in language,
Hugely. Yeah.
that creates temples and also playgrounds with swings and grottos and valleys. And I mean, she really speaks capital
Yes.
in nature.
Okay, so the next poem, and so the point is that we get healing, psychological healing, when we open to our own unconscious, because our unconscious, our self, if you will, gives us a vision of what we should do next. And I always remember the line from A Sound of Music, or The Sound of Music, where the Mother Superior says to Maria, whenever God slams a door, he opens a window. And that's the point, that if we give it a chance, we will find another way.
Mm-hmm. And I love too the tenacity part of, when one door closes, another opens, and I'm like, no, I'm an architect. Grab the knob, turn it. That's how doors work.
Yeah.
And it's like or remodel, tear down the wall,
open the window, right?
Open the window. Yeah. So it's always there's always another, the third option. I mean, someone tells me, oh, pick A or B. I'll create C and I'll pick that one.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so the next two poems relate to the name of the book. And so the first of these is called Call Us. It's on page 34. And it's a relatively short poem. Call Us by Amanda Gorman. Grant us this day, bruising the make of us. At times, over half of our bodies are not our own. Our persons made vessels for non-human cells. To them, we are a boat of a being, essential, a country, a continent, a planet. A human microbiome is all the writhing forms on and inside this body, drafted under our life. We are not me, we are we. Call us what we carry.
It's the last line, the last phrase, call us what we carry. I mean, there you go. There's the honesty. There's the, don't waste trouble. Make shame walk the plank. Don't be afraid of yourself. Just call us what we carry. I mean, just look down at your hands. As she said, like a blooming thing, open, but unemptied. Yeah. What's the fullness within your empty hand? And call us what we carry. I mean, that right there, you could live by that little, in a sense, almost a koan. It's a koan. Right.
Now, I think that everyone who is here, in anybody that has received my notice from this morning an hour ago or so, or an hour and a half ago, will have seen this poem, which I think is quite beautiful. But we're going to read it again for those of you who are not on our mailing list. And at the end of it, I'm going to give you our mailing list so that you can get the occasional goodies from Skip, and also be aware of our sessions. But in any case, in this poem, pardon?
Shall I read Call Us? Or are we going to move?
Oh, I beg your pardon. Okay. Yes, you can read Call Us first. Right. Go ahead.
And then we'll go to your
Right. Then we'll go to the punchline.
This is an exciting session. We're go. Let's go.
Yeah, right.
Good,
Go
good.
ahead.
Okay. Call Us by Amanda Gorman. Grant us this day, bruising the make of us. At times, over half our bodies are not our own. Our persons made vessel for non-human cells. To them, we are a boat of being, essential, a country, a continent, a planet, a human microbiome is all the writhing forms on and inside this body, drafted under our life. We are not me, we are we. Call us what we carry. And I just say call us what we carry, self, but we are not me, we are we, and then add call us what we carry. And there's the honesty of sociology. What's going on in society now?
Yeah, right. Okay. Now, this is a reality check that we all need. And, we just launched the Webb Space Telescope yesterday, and of course, since we've been in the manned space, or in the spacecraft era, since Voyager, we've looked back at ourselves and seen that we just live on this small blue dot in the middle of a vast universe.
Well, and like Carl Sagan said when asked, is there life on other planets? And he said, I certainly hope so. Otherwise, what a big waste of space.
Right. And so which is the punchline of the movie Cosmos, which was based on a novel written by Carl Sagan. I suspect that the punchline of the movie might have come from his wife after Carl's death, because Carl got a little bit confused, should I say, at the end of his life, and insisted on the logos, and he never understood the eros part of life, sadly. And okay, all right, so here we are. We're going to do one more poem out of this book, which is a rich experience to have these poems. And then I want to highlight some sections of this poem which I really love and are really impressive. And it's called What We Carry. So surely enough, if you don't have the poem in front of you, you will know the meaning of this book at the end. And this will give you some thoughts about it. What We Carry by Amanda Gorman. As kids, we sat in grass, fished our hands into the dirt. We felt that damp brown universe writhe, alert and alive, earth cupped in the boat of our palms. Our eyes waxed wide with wonder. Children understand. Even grime is a gift. Even what is mired is miraculous. What is marred is still marvelous. Ark, a boat like that which preserved Noah's family and animals from the flood. The word comes from the Latin word arca, meaning chest, much like the Latin word arcere, I think, to close up, defend, or contain. Ark can also mean the traditional place in a synagogue for the scrolls of the Torah. That is to say, we put words in the ark. Where else to put them? We continue speaking, writing, hoping, living, loving, fighting. That is to say, we believe beyond disaster. Even endings end. At the lip of land, time arcs into itself. It is not a repeat, but a reckoning. Days can't help but walk two by two, the past and present, paired and paralleled. It is the future we save from ourselves, for ourselves. Words matter, for language is an art. Yes, language is an art, an articulate artifact. Language is a life craft. Yes. Language is a life raft. We have recalled how to touch each other and how to trust all that is good and all right. We have learned our true names, not what we are called, but what we are called. But what we are called to carry forth from here. What do we carry if not what and who we care most for? What are we if not the price of light? Loss is the cost of loving, a debt more than worth every pulse and pull. We know that because we have decided to remember. We know this because we have decided to remember. The truth is, one globe, wonder flawed, here's to the preservation of a light so terrific. The truth is, there is joy in discarding almost everything. Our rage, our wreckage, our hubris, our hate, our ghosts, our greed, our wrath, our wars on the beating shore. We haven't any haven for them here. Rejoice, for what we have left behind will not free us, but what we have left is all we need. We are enough, armed only with our hands, open but unemptied. Just like a blooming thing, we walk into tomorrow, carrying nothing but the world. Can't read that poem without it making me emotional. And I just want to highlight a few of the passages that are particularly meaningful to me here. The first is, it is the future we save from ourselves, for ourselves. Oh boy, is that ever true? Mm-hmm. And then another segment here. Loss is the cost of loving, a debt more than worth every pulse and pull. We know this because we have decided to remember. And isn't that beautiful?
Yeah.
And we walk into tomorrow carrying nothing but the world. And so call us what we carry is a reference to that last word. What we carry, each and every one of us, is the world. And so over to Jordan.
And to add the highlight, with our hands open but unemptied. She's I like that, she's self-plagiarizing. She's and there's a consistent DNA that's going through her work with these open hands but unemptied, which is a gesture. When you're giving, you reach out, you hold your palm, down, your palm up, but open but unemptied, meaning we are already full. And in that sense of the world, carrying nothing but the world. So that it's so reminiscent of the William Blake line of, heaven on the head of a pen, eternity, infinity in a grain of sand. I'm really butchering the quote, but heaven in a grain of sand, eternity in a moment. And that we are all we have, and we are all we need. And you would call the passages you called attention to, just, I love it when writing makes its own bold font as you read it, and things jump out like musical rises, crescendos, amplifications, highlights, and I kind of smile that, you know, it's all in this one font and it's all in this one size. And how could that ever influence anyone, except when you roll it in your mouth and you speak it and you're moved? Yeah. And that's the I think that as you put in the I think in the email yesterday, you know, the transcendent function of poetry, where poetry is that language which can connect us to self, other, the world. I mean, it's a liminal in between space of language, where it's abridged, it can be truncated, and it's about feel and form more than messaging.
Right. Okay. So why don't you read the poem?
I'll read it.
And then there's a comment here on YouTube that I would really like to respond to.
Nice.
So
I'll read.
Carry on.
Yeah, what we carry. Nice pun. Carry on. What We Carry by Amanda Gorman. As kids, we sat in grass, fished our hands into the dirt. We felt that damp brown universe writhe, alert and alive, earth cupped in the boat of our palms. Our eyes waxed wide with wonder. Children understand. Even grime is a gift. Even what is mired is miraculous. What is marred is still marvelous. Ark, a boat like that which preserved Noah's family and animals from the flood. The word comes from the Latin word arca, meaning chest, much like the Latin word arcere, to close up, defend, or contain. Ark can also mean the traditional place in a synagogue for the scrolls of the Torah. That is to say, we put words in the ark. Where else to put them? We continue speaking, writing, hoping, living, loving, fighting. That is to say, we believe beyond disaster. Even endings end at the lip of land. Time arcs into itself. It is not a repeat, but a reckoning. Days can't help but walk two by two, the past and present paired and paralleled. Is the future we save from ourselves, for ourselves. Words matter, for language is an arc. Yes, language is an art, an articulate artifact. Language is a life craft. Yes, language is a life raft. We have recalled how to touch each other and how to trust all that is good and all right. We have learned our true names, not what we are called, but what we are called to carry forth from here. What do we carry, if not what and who we care most for? What are we, if not the price of light? A debt more than worth every pulse and pull. We know this because we have decided to remember. The truth is, one globe, wonder flawed. Here's to the preservation of a light so terrific. The truth is, there is joy in discarding almost everything. Our rage, our wreckage, our hubris, our hate, our ghosts, our greed, our wrath, our wars on the beating shore. We haven't any haven for them here. Rejoice, for what we have left behind will not free us, but what we have left is all we need. We are enough, armed only with our hands. open but unemptied. Just like a blooming thing, we walk into tomorrow, carrying nothing but the world.
Right on. And obviously, at this point, we are the world. We know it from our COVID experience now, because if we don't solve this disease for the whole world, it's ultimately going to get us. There'll be so many variants that our vaccines won't be able to keep up. The only reason we know that we have flu under control is because we know where flu originates every year, which is it originates on pig farms in China. And because we know that, scientists are able to identify the flu that's going to be rampant in the coming year and create vaccines for that. But what we know from COVID is that we don't know where it originates, or we don't know where the variants originate, because we know Alpha originated probably in China, but Delta originated in India, and Omicron originated in South Africa, and we simply don't know where it originates, and therefore we don't know what to make vaccines for necessarily. I mean, right now we probably do, because they become very powerful, and therefore they become dominant, as Omicron has done. But I'm not sure we can keep up with it unless we cure the world.
And I would agree,
most
because
of it.
we're seeing in very short order the iterations of a life cycle and the evolutions that occur in life by watching this virus. And I hate to quote Jurassic Park, but life, it always finds a way, and so it's iterating, it's evolving, and we're basically riding the poisonous horse, and you don't know who you're going to get it from. And to me, it's very much a negative metaphor of how we are influenced, for example, today, by this language in a very positive way that speaks of the negative, but doesn't chastise the negative. There's no shaming behavior in Amanda Gorman's book. There's no shaming behavior in the pandemic of the virus, but you look at what it causes in terms of civil wars of vaccination versus not vaccination. I mean, with polio years back, everyone, raise your arm and pop, and well, then it was gone. And now there's you can't tell me what to do, and back and forth. So I think that in the pandemic, we can utilize the virus itself to, in short order, over just a couple of years, to see the iteration of a whole lineage of life cycle and ancestor of the virus. There's a whole culture literally forming. And you had a comment you mentioned on YouTube that you wanted to.
Yeah, well, there's someone named John McSmith. Whether that's his true name or not is an open question, but he accuses me, says, "You frigging snowflake, you getting emotional reading a poem," and then he puts emoticons that make it look like he's laughing at me. And then he says, "Who is this we?" Well, John, in the spirit of the season, I'm not going to immediately ban you from this YouTube channel, but I do want to comment on how idiotic your comment is. And you can.
I will say, as a former semi-pro fighter, also, someone calling someone a name, snowflake, that's machismo.
Yeah.
And you know what that equals is weakness. And that'll maybe stir you up a little more. But if you can get stirred up by words, you have a very low sense of confidence. And I will also say that when you are unthreatened, you're strong enough to be gentle. You're fierce enough to be compassionate because you can actually listen instead of getting stirred up.
Right.
So the fact that you came at Skip in quite a, I mean, I can't even call it pre-adolescent because I don't want to insult pre-adolescents. You know, I don't want to say 4-year-old because I don't want to insult 4-year-olds. But, you know, I have to say that that comment is one of the most bonehead, reactionary. I don't know who you're still trying to impress, your mom or your dad, but you're playing pecking order, and pecking makes very shitty order.
Okay, well, let's not
So
call.
I'm sorry. I'll
let's
take,
not
take
call
the counterpoint of not holidays.
Let's not call others. He made a couple of comments which have been interfered with by the system, but then he says, "Okay, thanks for calling me an idiot. Excuse, dude, cried from mere words on a page. Okay, fella, now I'm a child."
Well, here's the thing.
Okay,
if you can't get moved by words in a poem, you don't have life.
Yeah, you don't have life.
You have not dropped in. You're superficial. You're skipping stones. You're basically playing freeze tag with no one else. It's like touch and run. But to get emotional, tears don't always equal sadness. And to me, actually, tears are really typically sacred adornments. The jewelry you can't buy.
Let's not go much further on that aspect. And I don't need you to come to my defense per se, Jordan, on this particular. I just want to explain why, in the spirit of comity and season, I haven't yet sent this guy packing. And so, John McSmith, I say to you, if you think that I'm a snowflake, I want you to compare your life to mine. Okay, I have served a career in the U.S. Marine Corps and retired as a lieutenant colonel. I still have my uniforms in my closet, and I sometimes wear them so that I can do a honor salute for retired veterans. I have completed a law degree and practiced law for 5 years. I completed an MBA in statistics, basically. and so if you think that's a snowflake, let me explain something about Jungian psychology. Jungian psychology is intended to make a connection between you and your deep unconscious. And one of the things that I often talk about is the distinction between logos and eros. And what you are accusing me of is the fact that I am connected with my unconscious and therefore with eros more than logos. And the problem with logos is there's absolutely nothing alive in the logos. Even Amanda's words, once they're on a page, they are logos and they're not alive. What is alive is the human connection between Amanda and me. And in the what I have found is that the things in my life that I remember were numinous. My memories, as I've done an inventory of my memories, the things that I can remember are numinous things. And if you don't know what that means, you'll need to go look it up. But this is what we're about here on this YouTube channel. And so John says, yeah, cancel me. Okay, well, here, I'm not going to cancel you until I get my message across.
Well, and I'd like to say too, stepping back out of, I guess, my hypocrisy of, being your Cerberus and just jumping in like I'm yanking on some leash that doesn't exist. Rather than shaming John, I think that it's important that he made an outburst, and it's not that it's something to be apologized for. He did what he did for his reasons, and in the spirit of the holidays, maybe John will continue to do what he does for his own reasons, and I wonder when his reasons will benefit him, and when that change will occur where he doesn't have to make fun of things and he can actually resonate or just move on.
It's about individuation. He says, a human connection between a human and a literary character. This guy is hopeless romantic. You can't shame me. I have my opinions. I don't like them. That's okay. Or you don't like them. That's okay. Well, it's not that, John. It's that Dr. Jung speaks heavily about the idea of individuation, and you obviously haven't a clue about what individuation means. So if you want to learn what it means, and you can't look it up in a dictionary, because if you do look it up in a dictionary, you still won't grok it. It has to be lived. And, I have a limited time in my life in which I can share some ideas with people. And there are many people who do like what they hear here. As of today, I see I have 15,600 subscribers. So there's more than a few who think that they're getting something of value here.
And I think, I not to interrupt, but to interrupt, I kind of think we've given John his due, and I think we should move on with our session and not caught into the hijacker.
Right. Okay. So here's the point that I want to make in general for this session. We are not about making a venue where people can find themselves. If you're still in an individuation level, which has to do with a stage of consciousness, such as that you have to engage in such an argument, that means you have to take, that means there's a lacking in your own individuation. You're not prepared to learn. And so I don't have to tolerate trolls here. And you're obviously a troll that's very busy, making some sort of point. I don't know what it is here, but I don't tolerate trolls. And so you will shortly find yourself out on the street talking to yourself or trolling someone else. And so I wish you well, and I'm going to take care of that right now. So goodbye, take your individuation someplace else. And when you're mature enough, you can find a way to communicate with me. Jordan,
Excellent.
go ahead.
I was going to say that perfect, excellent. There are consequences to everything. I mean, to me, I have my don't waste trouble. That's the truncated thing too. Don't make trouble either. And the thing is, it's not to be afraid of trouble. It's because don't worry, you don't need to make trouble. It'll find you just plenty fine. So, I appreciate that. And actually, I think there's a lesson here too. I see that kind of behavior a lot. I see it a lot less because I don't hang around in those same circles, but I do overhear and notice so many people. It's just always bitching and complaining. And then if you call them, oh, I'm just venting. Well, but there are whole groups where it's like it's like a let's get together for our pity party. And it's interesting because I don't want to put that down, because that is some people's legitimate release valve. But at the same time, I see it being developed as a habit in some people that is actually their defense mechanism, is also their life force.
Or their way of feeling their life. Because...
Right. And it's reactionary and skipping stones on the surface rather than dropping in and going, I can use the capital T, terrible. Wow. And horrifying, terrifying. Where, okay, that's big. But on the surface, it's not so much.
Yeah. So I think I've made my point by responding, and now he has disappeared from the chat, but the chat is still open for others. And I wish I hadn't had to do that, but at the same time, and I think
I can encapsulate it of reactionary versus responsive, and I think that puts the individuation piece in perspective, where he was being reactionary, you were being responsive, and there's a difference there. That's, I think, very important.
Right. So if your individuation is such that you feel you need to behave this way on the chat, I will remove you without qualms, and you will find yourself on the street. And this doesn't mean that I think you're any less of a person. It only means that I think you're not a mature enough person to listen to the messages that we present here. And
and I think his point of, he's entitled to his opinions. He is, and you're entitled to navigate right around those rocks in the river and not need to slam in them.
Yeah. And so, maybe we've all been there at one point. I don't necessarily deny that. I mean, I was a very logos oriented guy in my youth. I've learned from my study of Dr. Jung. So I want to talk about Christmas, though, because I did what happened to me on Christmas is that I gave 25 books. I didn't give. Fortunately, I didn't get back as many as I gave, but I do have a pile of reading to do, including this one from Jordan, came to me in the mail.
Excellent.
And I do appreciate it very much, Jordan.
Looking forward to you getting into this one.
Right.
They're few and far between, and to me, like I mentioned in the email, it's about value rather than cost, because Eric Newman, The Place of Creation, is something that it struck me so deeply, because he's one of Jung's primary students, one of the, in a sense, protege. I find he's a male Mary Louise von France in a way.
Oh, yes.
But I look forward to you getting into The Place of Creation, because especially since you hadn't heard the title, it's like, oh, cool. I can give you something that is going to be new to you, and see what you think about it, feel about it.
Well, we obviously respect Eric Neumann very much on this channel because he was regarded as sort of the crown prince of Jungian thought. Unfortunately, he died before Dr. Jung did, and he died at only 55. Otherwise, he would have made a huge impact on analytical psychology, and he did make a huge impact just as it was. And I had not heard of this series, and what this says is this is volume 3 of a series, and it's this volume is the place of creation. And of course, what we are talking about in our confluence is the importance of creation generally in terms of our own lives and our own creativity. And many people, you know, I would say a vast majority of men and many women in this country and probably around the world have been persuaded for at least half a century that art was just a waste of time. It was just a feel-good thing. It was just a fun thing. And therefore we can run it out of the schools and nobody will know the difference, and everything will be hunky-dory. But that isn't the way it works. Human beings tend to wiggle just a little bit more than chess pieces, for example. And I think that a lot of people have started to realize that there's something missing in their lives, and that missing something is eros, and that we thought we could live our lives entirely on logos and rules and the Bible and so on. Well, here's the Bible, right? This is just a black doorstop unless somebody puts life into it. Okay, unless a gifted pastor puts life into this, it's just a black doorstop. It's logos, but it doesn't have anything to do with your life unless somebody interprets it for you. You know, they're saying this is a blue doorstop right here, this one that we've been reading from today. It's logos, it's a attractive book, but it is not alive. It only through Jordan's and my interpretation of it today does it gain life, and does it gain? It gains life when my tears are presented from the words. Then I'm putting life into it.
And actually, on the biblical theme too, I saw a cartoon recently that I found pretty hilarious. Actually, you have the 3 wise men on camels, right? And they stopped, and one of them says, "Well, why did you stop?" He said, "I'm having second thoughts about finding this kid." And I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "I've seen into the future, and he's going to send us to hell for dabbling in astrology to find him." You know, so it's like a grain of salt.
Oh, that's funny. But Debbie told me something yesterday. Here I've been looking at Buddhism also for about 25 years with Debbie. Debbie has become basically a lama without portfolio, because she took the 3-year retreat, which is the equivalent of divinity school in Buddhism, and she has been teaching it to people in the Washington area for about 20 years now, but she's not ordained. But anyway, the point I wanted to make is that Debbie told me something yesterday that I think she might have said one other time. about the three kings. And that was in Jesus goes missing from age 12 to age 30 in the Bible. There's no clear idea of what happens to Jesus during this period. And in India, it's very clearly known that the three kings were actually looking for a tulku, which is a reincarnated lama. And if you know anything about Tibetan Buddhism, you'll know that the Dalai Lama was like that. He was searched for about 2 years after the previous Dalai Lama had died. It was time to go out and search for the next Dalai Lama. And so he was born in 1935. And about 1937, a group of higher lamas from Lhasa went around Tibet searching for the reincarnation of the 13th Dalai Lama, and they selected this child who was from a very remote village in Tibet. And I think that most people who know anything about the work of the Dalai Lama can't doubt that he was exactly the right choice for this role. And in those, well, certainly in those days, and even to quite recently, there were many kings in India. And there were something like 200 princely states in India at the time of Gandhi. And so there are a lot of people running around calling themselves kings, and the kings, it may well have been that the kings had gone out searching for a reincarnation of someone. I don't know who. That would have to be somebody else's research. But, in India, it's a very common knowledge that Christ came to India and was educated, trained there by holy people, and then came back to do his ministry. And it makes a lot of sense. There was a lot of moving back and forth at the time of Christ across the world. There were even at that time, I think there were 500 million people, or at least I don't remember the number exactly. It might have been 100 million people, but there were 100 million human beings on the planet at the time of Christ. It wasn't just a few Jews in Jerusalem, but the whole planet was filling up. And so there was a lot of transits back and forth across that part of the world. And so it's completely believable to think that Jesus, if he had been selected as a tulku, would have gone away with some people at age 12 and come
sent
back
off to military school, except for divinity school.
Right. And gone away for training for 18 years and then came back. And, this is essentially what happened with the current Dalai Lama and all the Dalai Lamas before. So, as such, it's just a very interesting thought. It requires more research and writing. There's a lot of it in India. There's at least one monastery, if not two, that claim that they have, kind of a history of Jesus Christ in those years. But
and I think that's important because it takes the insular quality of the fundamentalist religion pieces and doesn't just make this, point this bottleneck, this of just only him. Because what happens is, well, you get to that bottleneck, it opens back up again, and that's the top of the hourglass, and that's the time gone. I mean, so there's, it reminds me, I love that Debbie brought that up, that he may have been in India for that 20-year career that he retired from, basically graduated from divinity school in a way. But a short poem I wrote years ago titled Stop I think it was like 4 lines, but it's, who's to free the prisoners when sand sleeps in the eternity of the tilted hourglass? And it's interesting because that India piece to me reminds me of that sand left in the top of the hourglass, that untold story.
Yeah.
And that really opens it up. I didn't know that. And that opens up that piece for me. Thank you.
Yeah, there's another piece, which I haven't researched yet, but Debbie told me that, in the Bible, the 3 kings did not arrive on Christmas Day when Jesus was born. They arrived 2 years later. And that would be completely in keeping with this Tibetan Buddhist practice of going out, 2 years after some key figure had died to look for reincarnation. And
it also works with I won't go to astrology, but just from an astronomy perspective, that bright star was not one star. It was actually the confluence of larger planets, so that they basically amplified all their brightness together. And in a sense, the 3 kings could also be the 3 stars, and you get the 3-part stars of Orion's belt, which the pyramids are aligned with. I mean, so there's a whole lot of synonymous history, astrologically, astronomically, religiously, through there, that actually all work together. And so, that 2 years later, if you look at the ephemeris, that's probably, was it Chris Christopherson? Jesus was a Capricorn, kind of. Well, that there's also actually in that year, it would have been more towards the summer solstice when that alignment happened. But if you dial it up 2 more years, you play with a whole different phenomenon of that star.
Yeah.
And what was happening across those 2 years, so his missing 0 to 2 and his missing 12 to 30. There's some great places to infill there.
Yeah, sure. And there is apparently quite a lot of research on this in India. And I think that it didn't, when the Council of Nicaea came along in 325, so 325 years after,
right,
after Christ lived, they slapdashed this book together and called it the Holy Bible. And it wasn't they that wanted to go research this any further in terms of its across the world aspect. But
right, and that's interesting too, that then Christianity starts in 325, not at 0. Because if you look at historical accounts, Jesus isn't mentioned much, if any at all. And so what's interesting is they've kind of, pun intended, resurrected this character as as the star of their religion, but it's 325 years later.
Right. And so, there's no doubt in my mind that Jesus Christ is a historical figure and lived.
No, me either.
Yeah. And that these are historical facts, and the books of the New Testament are testaments of various individuals, both disciples and prophets. and so it is a divine book. There's no doubt about that. But what we have to learn from Jungian psychology is that a book is just a book, whether it's by a bunch of priests in the year 325 or it's by Amanda Gorman today. It's nothing unless we put life into it. And our lives are nothing unless we put life into them. And so, with apologies to the man who has departed this session now because I've closed the door on him, we don't need, the reason I did that was I don't choose to have distractions on this channel, and you make your own judgment, of course. And what we have had is, quite a number of people. I mean, over in 1 week, usually more than 250 people who've taken a look at each of our discussions on a weekly basis. And I usually estimate that they influence about 10 other people over a period of time with something that they heard on this channel. And
I appreciate you did that. You gave him some due, but then you cut him loose. And the way, from a business person's perspective, to me, learning how to fire someone, all you have to do is watch a really good comedian dismiss a heckler and cut them off at the knees. And it kind of becomes like the Monty Python scene, where he cuts his arms off. It's just a flesh wound, and he plays that game. But then there's a point where off of the head. I mean, it's just out. And I appreciate the way that you didn't shame him. You just expressed to him your perspective and then cut him loose.
Yeah. And it's not that I think trolls are bad or people who are trying to draw attention to themselves are bad. Certainly they are developing human beings, like many of us have been over our lifetimes. But I have a limited time left. I'm 75 years old. I don't make a secret of it. And if I'm going to make an impact, I have to make it, quite soon. And I don't have
continuously.
I don't have to, right. And I don't have to, have a logos oriented argument with someone who, obviously hasn't listened to the 3,000 hours of public video that's here.
And I love it when people try to use the defense of, I'm entitled to my opinion. That's cool. And I'm entitled to later. I mean, you're not entitled to be listened to by anyone unless they decide to. So that whole engagement, again, reactionary versus responsive.
Yeah. And
and you're right, it is attention getting.
Yeah. Myrtis is here.
Cool.
She says hello from Brazil.
Yes.
Hello, Myrtis, and welcome. And I hope you had a good Christmas. And Joe Fletcher says you've made an impact. And so thank you, Joe. Actually, I normally don't fish for compliments. And if I've fished for one here, I apologize, ladies and gentlemen. I normally don't go back and recount my resume. And that's to me, that's a healthy individuation point too, because actually asking for attention is often a form of aggression, just quieter. Yeah. And if you look at the website for the confluence here, which Tim Holmes put together, I intentionally asked that my name be the last in the group, because I think that everyone is participating in the confluence, and the confluence is now an ongoing thing, and Jordan is a part of that now. He's not a part of the organizing team for Confluence 22, but in our advanced reading group, which meets on Wednesday at 1:00 Eastern time, we have many people who are contributing to our confluence, and we've now understood it as that. Fortunately, we've started to see that we do have a perspective that's just a little bit different from anything anyone else is presenting at this point. And we're trying to get that to express out into the world. We're not pushing for donations or anything like that at this point of time. And I think Tim and I, at least, are committed to do this as a practice for our own spiritual health, and not as and I think Jordan is in that too, because obviously he's not earning anything by being here.
Yeah, to me, it's there's
not earning anything in the gold sense, but or it is in the gold sense, but it's a different kind of gold. And
and I would put that as, to me, it's the currency is not money. The currency here is value, and that's why I'm here on Sunday mornings, and most weeks on Wednesdays, and then Monday evenings. The currency to me is not money, it's value. And I don't even think about this as even giving back. This is something I'm interested in. And if I can get other people interested in their capital S self, along with, the weekly dance we do here, I'm all for it. And that currency of value and not money. And I appreciate the accolade that you just received there. That's an important here and there, but again, it's not so much compliment, it's more the responsive piece, how people are moved, how they are able to engage, even in simply the chat, with what then we're doing here, so they can have more robust engagement in their own lives.
Well, and it is an art form after all. And what I've learned in 25 years of doing, consciously doing art, I guess, is that when I do art of any form, it makes my life work better in many ways that I can't always put my finger on, except in retrospect. But I do find that when I'm doing art and in some form, and these conversations are an art form, my life works better in general. And not only during these sessions. Joe says it's the holidays, compliments are free. So thank you, Joe.
and compliments are free. That's awesome.
Yeah, and Kathy says the irony is in the opportunity to affect change where it's most needed. A lesson taught is not always a lesson caught. He wasn't ready in that now. That's quite true. And from Texas, he says, I would donate to keep these broadcasts going. And so thank you for that. I do have a Patreon page. Jordan may have one as well. And at one point, I
don't.
was thinking of making that a condition of participating in the advanced reading group, but I found that I just could not enforce it. And so, and it wasn't because people resisted it, it was because I didn't choose to enforce it. And so we do have a, if you're a member of the advanced reading group, we do have a suggested donation of $10 a month, but it's not necessary, and I don't enforce it. And I'm just happy that people around the world are benefited by what we're doing here. And in terms of the confluence, and what I said with Jordan is, we are doing a demonstration. The six of us that are involved in organizing our program for next June, we are doing a demonstration, which we hope will be carried forward by others. And, you know, Jordan will be there, and many other people that I respect completely will also be there. And I'm hopeful that Jordan will organize such things for Taos at some point in the future. You know, the choice of Helena just turned out because Tim Holmes and I have a relationship that's developed over the last couple of years, that we respect one another very highly. And I've given quite a number of Tim's pieces to others, and they are quite interesting. I guess as a final thing here, let me just share 3 Christmas cards that Tim has shared with me, and they're quite unique. They're Christmas cards that over the last 40 years Tim has put together, and you know, some people have even called them dark, and Tim doesn't care because he's an artist, and because of the shock. Wait a minute, Jordan, I'm not. Is that one of Tim? Oh, that's Tim's other piece. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah,
That's
that's
powerful.
an incredible one. Okay, so here's a Christmas card that Tim put together in when he was in college, and I'll ask Jordan to comment on it. And it's called The Potato Pickers Are Visited by the Angels. And of course, Tim and I are both fans of the work of Vincent van Gogh, and his most famous painting, or one of his most famous paintings, was The Potato Eaters. And it's meaningful to me, and in many ways, because my wife and mother-in-law are both from Maine, and they actually did pick potatoes in Debbie's youth. So,
Well, to me, there's a trinity of wholeness of self, because you have the Cyclops male on the left and the Cyclops female on the right. It takes both of them to make 2 eyes in one head, and then the angel coming down puts them together. So to me, it's an interesting Jungian trinity of the capital S self. And pick your potatoes, you know, the French for potato is pomme de terre, which is apple of the earth. And the apple of the earth is, you're nourished from unseen sources. Potatoes grow underground. So
yeah,
it's an excellent card.
Yeah, I think it's terrific also. Anyway,
Yeah,
I'll just leave it at that example. But Tim commented that gallery owners were left flat-footed with that. Okay, so Joe Fletcher asked this question. I have a question from the Red Book Liber Secundus 4446, page 290. The God is afraid of man. This use of the word afraid has had its hooks in my mind for a week now. Any thoughts? Do you have any thoughts on that?
that's a really good question, because that word has stuck out to me from a translation perspective, where the word afraid doesn't feel to be robust enough. And it seems to have an implication of influence, as like the Latin, to influence, seems more towards what that word should be. I think so. God is afraid of man. I feel like that's an untrue statement, except that it's not the right statement. I think it's a mistranslation. I think that one adverb, as it would be, afraid, it's somewhat verb, but it's more diet verb. And I think afraid would be more, I don't know the original German, and I'm not an expert there. I'm no philologist.
So
it does feel, I think that's a great pull of the importance of a single word that can change the whole tenor of a whole thing. And I think that's right. God is afraid. I think there's more as influenced by or to influence. There's some engagement there, but afraid would equal anxiety, whereas fear would be awareness. And I think afraid is a little too petty a word to be appropriate in that context, if that resonates.
Yeah, I'm just looking at page 290, and Joe is referring here to the reader's edition, the one that I have right within arm's reach here, not to the folio edition.
Can you read the sentence before and after that one with the phrase?
And I do have an idea about what this is referring to. Okay, so what it's referring to relates to the first day, and I can't go back into the entire mythology here, but we have to refer back to page 289, and I'll just the God is afraid of man is the last sentence in this section, but let me read the entire section that's highlighted here. You need to undertake only half the way. He will undertake the other half. In other words, God comes from the unconscious, and if you pay attention to the God that's within you, he'll come half the way toward you. If you go beyond him, blindness will befall you. And I think that would refer to, if you think you're smarter than what God is and what the healing that the unconscious can bring you, you're not going to be able to see it. You won't grok it. Okay, so if he goes beyond you, paralysis will befall him. Therefore, and insofar as it is a manner of the gods to go beyond mortals, they become paralyzed and become as helpless as children. Divinity and humanity should remain preserved. If man should remain before the God and the God remain before man, the high blazing flame is the middle way, whose luminous course runs between him, human and divine. The divine primordial power is blind since its face has become human. The human is the face of the Godhead. If the God comes near you, then plead for your life to be spared, since the God is loving horror. The ancients said it is terrible to fall into the hands of the living God. They spoke thus because they knew, since they were still close to the ancient forest, and they turned green like the trees in a childlike manner and ascended far away toward the east. Consequently, they fell into the hands of the living God. They learned to kneel and to lie with their faces down, to beg for pity, and they learned to live in servile fear and to be grateful. But he who saw him, the terrible, beautiful one with his black velvet eyes and the long eyelashes, the eyes that do not see, but merely gaze lovingly and fearfully, he has learned to cry out and whimper so that he can at least reach the ear of the Godhead. Only your fearful cry can stop the God. And then you see that the God also trembles. Since he stands confronting his face, his observing gaze in you, and he feels unknown power. The God is afraid of man. Now, I think that a great metaphor for this is in the story of let's see, I actually have the I'm sorry, I have the actual image that appears in the Red Book, so I want to share that with you. And I think it's the god is called Izdubar. And so let me pull that image up so we know what we're talking about here. It's an image that does appear in the Red Book. And why am I not finding it? Okay, just a moment. Place to look. Okay. All right, here's the image from the Red Book. Okay, so here, what you're seeing is the god Izdubar is coming from the east, and what you see here at his base, and probably most people didn't even notice it, is here's Jung actually
at his feet,
praying before Izdubar, and Izdubar starts asking, where the other gods are, I think, something like that. And he says, isn't it at the place of the rising sun? So he keeps going toward the rising sun. And Jung starts to tell him things that human beings know that gods don't know. And so one of the things Izdubar finds out, is that the sun is, not a being, and it's actually a star, and it's not on the planet. So he can't, he can keep going to the west to follow the sun, but he's not going to find what he's looking for. And that literally wounds Izdubar, because Izdubar, the god, assumed that he was this great being. And with Jung at his on his knees at his feet, and what happens is Izdubar gets sicker and sicker because he's finding out all this science in the West that proves that he doesn't exist, and Jung's solution is he literally saves Izdubar's life by allowing him to shrink down, bringing him down, and putting him in an egg, which he then puts in his pocket. And what has happened here is that Jung has performed an act of imagination where he saw the God and he realized that this was in his unconscious and therefore in his imagination. And therefore in his imagination, he could shrink this God down, put him back and nurse him back to health, which is exactly what Jung did. And so that brings up my dictum that, Nietzsche said God is dead, and Jung found the living God and where he lives and how he goes about doing the business of the Godhead. Jordan, did you want to?
I was going to say that reminds me of Plate 8. That this from, of course,
The Bhagavad Gita, yeah.
Yeah. But Plate 8 then tells that story, but in different frames.
Mm-hmm.
And then that being, so it's interesting. It's not a direct correspondence, but the similarity is interesting, because even in Plate 8, it's that occurs in every millennia, Krishna. And there's a cycle that's then been repeated twice over 2,000 years, that we're in now.
Yeah,
I mean, it's an intense time. It's an intense time,
right? And Jung, I mean, one should read Answer to Job, and particularly the last 10 paragraphs of Answer to Job, especially, which Jung emphasized, but people still don't get. And what he said in paragraph 752, or 751, I think it is that what people don't understand is that I believe the psyche is real. Okay, and the things that are found in the self are real. And the problem with the logos is the logos thinks it's the only thing that's real because you can touch it. Okay, even this is logos once it's manufactured and printed. And so but the psyche, which you can't see, and no one has actually seen God. I mean, even Job saw God as a burning bush and as a tornado, etc. And so you have to know that it exists. And if you deny that it exists, then you have to deny you have dreams. Okay.
And that reminds me of an article I wrote this last, maybe it was summer before last, about Echo and Narcissus. Echo, ECHO, not ego, but Echo, and Narcissus. And what's interesting is I wrote the article from the perspective of I've never read the story. I'm just going to use the three words Echo and Narcissus, and I'm going to play a path to self. And what's interesting is, of course, everyone knows Narcissus is gazing into his image in the water, his reflection, and he gets lost there. But Echo continually repeats the image outside of him, literally echoing. And after a while, he's shaken from the hypnosis of that self-reflection to go, oh, what was that? That was something outside of me that was saying me. And when he looks up, there she is. And so he sees within to see her, and then the self marries and completes itself. But it's interesting to me, Echo and Narcissus, just as the actual story, a lot different than that. But
Yeah.
just playing an intuition game of, in a sense, automatic writing. Okay, here's the title, Echo and Narcissus. Now, go. And it
Yeah.
was interesting because it kind of cycled back around to tell the same story as individuation, and that wasn't surprising to me, but it was pretty meaningful.
Yeah. And the next sentence, Joe, after the sentence you raised, that the God is afraid
Right.
of man, the next sentence says, if my God is lamed, I must stand by him, since I cannot abandon the much loved. And the essence of it is that you have to understand what the religious types have been saying for thousands of years, that we have these pastors and priests and mullahs that get up and they opine on Sunday morning or Friday night or whenever it is, and they're talking about something that can't be seen. And so if they, through their life force, can't convey it to you, then your God is lamed, surely. But if through the life force you can have a numinous experience, then God is powerful. And so when Amanda Gorman writes a poem that causes me to tear up, to me, that means that it's a numinous thing. And she's not only, I've never met her, of course, she doesn't know me from a hole in the ground, but she has conveyed directly from her psyche to my psyche something that is very meaningful to me. And that's godlike. And, and so, I often talk about the Navy hymn, for example, which is highlighted at the Naval Academy Chapel. And if I get into much of a discussion of it, I start to tear up. And the reason is that my whole life is tied up in those few words. I cannot speak them without having a numinous experience. A numinous experience comes upon me at that moment. I mean, if I'm sitting here as I am, I can't make myself have a numinous experience unless I start talking about something that is in fact numinous to me, which is that hymn.
And those aren't tears of sadness, they're life welling up.
Absolutely. And I first heard that hymn when I was about 10 years old at the Naval Air Station Chapel in Norfolk, Virginia. And at that time, that was the busiest airport in the world. And they had a takeoff for landing every 3 minutes, which later was taken over by O'Hare and then by Hartsfield Airport. But the people who came to that chapel at that air station, the reason they came to church was that their loved ones were out on anti-submarine duty. This was in the mid-50s, and they were looking for Russian submarines and off the coast of the United States. And some of those guys didn't come back because they ran into weather or a failure or something. So that when the congregation of that chapel sang the Navy hymn, it was heartfelt. It was, I remember it being numinous even then, and I feel my own emotion now thinking of it, that those people had skin in the game.
Mm-hmm.
And they knew what what that hymn meant, which was not only their hope, their love for their loved ones, but to have a higher power, we can say today, perhaps an unconscious power, but nonetheless a higher power that kept their loved ones alive during those missions. And
Mm-hmm.
and I definitely know how deeply the unconscious transmission of that numinous fact got into my blood at the age of 10, and it hasn't left since. But anyway.
Mm-hmm. No. That's I think that's an important story to be told, as a great anecdotal fact of the evidence of how the numinous moves within, through, around us. That's an important story to share.
And the collective unconscious of that, I've just thought of this now, but the collective unconscious does transmit things across great distance. I have no doubt about that. Mm-hmm. And so we can think of that chapel where all those people were singing that hymn together as basically being a transmitter of a power that's beyond us, that's in the unconscious, that it was transmitted to their loved ones even then.
Well, and even take a look at the pyramid. I mean, the pyramid itself is its own foundation, which is a nice metaphor of self. And if you also look at it, the 4 psychological functions, there are 4 sides on the base. And then there are 4 trinities, 4 triangles that come together from each of those sides. But then take that in Egypt, and then take that to Mesoamerica or the Mayan, the Aztec, and they built pyramids. And in similar times, maybe 1 or 2 people in boats went from one to the other, but the same phenomenon was occurring across cultures that had no physical contact.
Yeah. So Neil says, God gave us free will, he better be afraid. and then Joe says,
that's priceless. Nice.
Your words on modern Christianity ring true in my ears. Thanks for taking this time. Your memory of the chapel reminds me of the chapel in Moby Dick. The pulpit was the helm of an old ship. What a lovely sermon as well, worth reading again. And I would just say that about the Naval Academy Chapel, I very rarely go there for a service anymore, because the chaplain corps of the Navy has been taken over by fundamentalists. And the issue is with fundamentalism that they are declaring the Bible as true. Well, I agree that the Bible is 100% true. Also the Bhagavad Gita and also a few other sacred texts. And but what they mean is that it is physically true. Okay, what the way they teach it and sermonize on it is by saying things that modern men can't accept as scientifically accurate. And the problem is that they're talking about a logos understanding of the Bible instead of an eros understanding of the Bible. And if you understand the Bible from an eros perspective, then you can say it is true and it is in your heart, and it can help you to find God, find the living God. And
You know
if, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, what's interesting about the fundamentalists is that there's that kind of fiction of magical thinking that's a substitute for creativity. And the problem is, then, I mean, my joke is, well, most fundamentalists have really bad fundamentals because they're so limited to just the I can see, touch, smell, feel. Oh, but I'm going to worship what I can't. Except that's a capital O other.
Yeah.
And that's the unconscious, and they get lost in spite and hate. And I think because there's a general irritation because there's a removal from nature, where nature will kill you, but it'll also nourish you. And
yes.
I just find that the preachy becomes judgy really fast with little to no discernment. One, as to the effect it has on another person, or the effect it has on the culture and the collective itself.
Right. So for me, walking in that building is a numinous experience today.
Right.
And, it's just so meaningful to me to walk into the building. I don't need a service to be there. And
Right.
I've had, as everyone knows, I've had several numinous experiences there with not another soul in the sanctuary. And in the basement of the chapel, there is the crypt of John Paul Jones, and I almost can't walk into that crypt without being completely moved by it. I can't even read the words that John Paul Jones said during his lifetime during the American Revolution without becoming emotional. And he's the father of the American Navy, as many know. And so anyway, there surely is a living God. And if you want to know more about this, there is on the home page of this YouTube channel, there is a link to a talk I gave about a year and a half ago called Finding the Living God, in which I go through how to go about finding the living God in your own life. And I urge you to find it. So anyway, we got to wrap up here.
Oh, wow. We've almost gone 3.
Yeah, 3 hours. That's
nice.
That's enough. But thank you one and all for being with us today. And maybe the people that came the latest got the best sermon. I don't know. But anyway, we read today from Amanda Gorman's book, Call Us What We Carry. It is a bestseller right now. It just launched about 10 days ago. And I would urge you to find a copy of this book and read it.
And I would like to send sentiments out to the one who, I guess, McSmith, who was ejected, for that person to find what is of chief value to them that brings them joy, and that they can work with in their life in a way that works for them. Because that way it feels like it might bleed off some of that anger and hatred just to do some weeding in the garden, and do something that works for them to evolve. So that today is simply a milestone, but it's a past remembrance that is of no consequence to the good that you can do later.
Right. Neil says, I don't think religion should be scientifically proven. Science only proves logos. Exactly. Um,
Mhm.
and so I just read a couple of the comments that are on the back cover of this book. One from a person named Tracy K. Smith. I don't know who she is, but do you know that name, Jordan?
I don't. And I don't.
Okay, but her comment is Amanda Gorman is a seer, a seeker, a speaker of our most difficult and astonishing truths. Reading these poems, I feel at once haunted, heartened, and formidably ministered to. Yeah, I concur. And the
Mhm.
other quote is from Malala Yousafzai, who was won the Nobel Peace Prize. And she said, a book of poetry so alive, you want to hold it and protect it, to read it all at once and then immediately read it again. And I concur entirely.
Mhm.
Amanda is only 22, and so I'm sure the people of the Library of Congress would feel very awkward to name her the poet laureate of the United States at this point, since that was reserved for 70-year-old people like Robert Frost. But
Right. Right.
nonetheless, the only poet that moves me more is Sherry Lovelaar, who will be speaking at our confluence next summer and is part of our organizing group. And so I'm going to just put the confluence information up again. And just to remind everyone, this is a invitation only event. And so you need to go through the website and let us know why you want to be present, and then you will receive an invitation. And there will only be 30 people present. We will be documenting some of it on video, but you will not be able to get how numinous this event will be without physically being there and being a part of it. And there will be parts of it that even start before it starts. And as I said, we met last November, last month, in California to plan this, and we found that we were already in the confluence at that point. And it was quite a numinous experience for us. We're going to do the same thing again in early March, COVID permitting. And so I promise that it's going to be quite a numinous experience, and you will find that you will be moved by the event if you attend. And so with that piece, thank you, Jordan.
Definitely.
And
Great
we'll
to you this
see
week, and
you
I'll
see
tomorrow
you
evening.
tomorrow, I guess, maybe.